interest. This morning, we're talking about a finding or a research that was conducted in line with fiscal policies and how to address inequalities. And these are the issues I'll be discussing right here on Business Day. I have with me in the studio Mr. Isaac Yao Obing. He is the Deputy Country Coordinator for CAT Ghana. And you're welcome, Isaac, to the studio. And also I have with me Hilary Enos Edu. She is the Programs Associate at CAT Ghana. You're also welcome.
Thank you.
So let's talk about this particular findings, that's the fiscal policies to address inequalities. What actually caused or probably prompted you to go into such a research? I'll start off with you, Isaac.
Thank you for the question. We are all aware of the Sustainable Development Goals,
Okay.
which is globally being promoted. And one of some of the areas of the Sustainable Development Goals have to do with education, access to education and quality education,
Okay.
access to health and quality health care, and that of reducing inequality. So as part of agenda to promote the SDG goals, we conducted research in these areas to find out how best Ghana can reduce inequalities in the area of education and health.
So then, Hilary, what was some of your major findings after you conducted the research?
Okay, so just to start off, some of the main ways for us to reduce these inequalities is through taxation and also through government's expenditure in the health and education sectors. And we found that with taxation, for example, the government collects 55% of taxes from indirect taxes. And in this regard, it has a high overexposure to the poor, meaning that the poor pay the same amount in indirect taxes as the rich would. But because the poor earn less than the rich, they spend most of their income on some of these goods, for example. Yes, we also found that in terms of taxation, there are a lot of tax exemptions for big businesses and corporations who are able to pay these taxes, but instead are not paying the taxes because of the tax exemptions and tax holidays and tax evasions. And that is a major problem in terms of increasing taxes and tax revenue.
But let me also find out, talking about taxes and all that, are we really collecting enough taxes in the country?
As it stands now, we are not, because if you look at our research finding, we found out that tax to GDP ratio in Ghana is about 16%, which is below the sub-Saharan average of around 70%. And then if you compare it to the OECD's, it's which is about 32%, it means that there's much room for improvement. Yes.
We've been talking about the fact that there's a need for us to broaden our tax base. And as a country, focus has been on those in the formal sector who have been committed in paying taxes. And very often these institutions feel they have been overburdened with a lot of taxes. In a situation where we want to broaden our tax nets and want to bring on board the informal sector, what are some of the things that we can do to rope in the informal sector, since we are not collecting enough as a country?
Okay. The problem with tax collection when it comes to the informal sector has to do with unavailability of data. There are a lot of people who are operating underground economy. So in order to be able to bring them on board, the whole country need to collect data on all the activities that go on in the country. Without having the data of activities in the country, it becomes highly impossible to be able to collect taxes from these people. So I think the national insurance ID that is coming will
the
be
identification card.
Identification card will be a way to solve that, because I mean with that we'll be able to track wherever you are and then bring you on board. And then the GPS system is also another way that we can collect data on all activities that go on in the country.
Why is it difficult as a country? We've been talking about the fact that access to data has a major challenge, and yeah, we can relate to that when we talk about unemployment situation, and where the government, where president even made mention of the fact that availability of data for us to even talk about how best we have been able to address the situation is a problem. Why is it difficult as a country for us to be able to have adequate data in certain sectors of the economy, for us to be able to make good predictions or even provide solutions on how best to address some of these challenges?
Okay, so I would say a major problem for data collection is maybe there are not enough resource personnel to actually go out and collect the data. So it could be a shortage of employees at these ministries who are unable to go out to collect the data, and also enforcing some of the laws. So if you're a business, for example, and you fail to register your company, for example, it limits the data that we would have. So the government should probably go out to make sure that each business registers their companies to ensure that they do pay the taxes which goes along with that.
But do you think it's really an issue of not having adequate personnel? Because we have a lot of unemployed people in the system. So if we don't really have enough personnel to go, our trained personnel, can't we, if we attach importance to data collection, can't we also address this particular situation?
There should be the political will. There should be the political will.
Okay.
We need to be up and doing. We need to prioritize it. If we prioritize it, we will do it. Like you said, there are a lot of unemployed graduates on the street. We can employ them, train them, and send them out there to collect the data for us. So, I mean, even if we need the best technology, we can also bring on board from elsewhere to train the personnel to do it. So, I mean, it's not an issue not to say what he said is not wrong, but I'm saying that we can do it. If there's that political will, we can do it.
To what extent, when we talk about inequalities and we talk about taxation and all that, to what extent would you say that the poor are getting poorer on daily basis, and the rich definitely, probably, is one would say that they are getting richer? To what extent was your research able to identify this gap?
So like I mentioned before with the indirect taxes and the consumables, so the poor are spending a significant amount of their income on certain goods, which makes them poorer. And then, for example, if we look at the health sector, for example, access to health facilities for some of the poor is very restricted. And as of last year, we found that 41%, the NHS coverage was only 41%, meaning there's another 59% which are not registered as part of the NHIS scheme, sorry. And with that, it means that if they go to the hospitals, they would have to spend a lot more of their income because they're not covered by the NHIS. And in that way, spending a lot of your income on the health sector, for example, or like on health, especially when you're sick, is a lot of money, you know.
But then how can government use taxation as a tool to be able to bridge the inequalities in the system?
Okay, so the government can bridge inequalities through taxation.
Okay.
By, when it comes to indirect taxes, the government need to identify goods that are consumed mostly by the poor and then reduce taxes on them. For example, if you look at the sachet water,
okay,
the poor person consumes sachet water, president drinks sachet water. So if you have tax on sachet water, it means that there's that kind of inequality there. The rich can pay for it, but the poor has problem. So we just need to identify the consumption basket that the poor mostly consume, and then reduce taxes on it. I mean, research has shown that women, who are considered most of the time considered as the vulnerable in society, and that of children, are the ones that have low income in developing countries. So if you are reducing indirect taxes, you should make sure that goods that are purchased by women and children will have a low tax on them. If you go to the advanced countries, like I studied in Germany, you go to the market and you mostly find that items that are bought by women and children are of low price than the men. Why do they do so? It is because they want to promote equality there. So if we want to reduce inequality, we have to use indirect taxes by identifying consumption basket of goods that are produced by the poor. And apart from that, in government bid to redistribute the revenue or the income that is realized through taxation, the government needs to identify critical areas. Critical areas, and put the taxes there. For example, if you check the education budget allocation, a chunk of the money went into compensation of salaries at the neglect of or at the detriment of infrastructure. So, I mean, we see on TV every day there are a lot of children sitting under trees, those sitting in dilapidated buildings, those who do not even have chalk, and what have you. So, if the government wants to reduce inequality through the fiscal policy, then expenditure needs to go into critical areas that are of most important to the poor, but not, I mean, collecting the monies and then throwing it out.
But per your analysis, you made mention of the fact that we need to identify goods that are consumed by the poor, and that's probably competing with the rich, and then we will be able to know how best to bridge the inequalities there. How would you assess, if we talk about the vulnerable or the poor in the society, what category of people are we talking about? Because if you use sachet water, for instance, and we want to say that even that, I know that for those whose income they find it very difficult, might not even be able to afford the sachet water. For us to say that we want to reduce some of the taxes that are being put on these ones, which category of people would you qualify or classify as poor in the society?
If you do the income analysis, you know the how do you call the percentage of the percentage wise. We know those who fall below 1% of income level, and those, I mean, like that, the distribution is there. So we just have to identify which level of the people in the country have low income, which is a bit below, let's say, 1%. There are people who cannot afford even 1 square meal a day. These are the people we are talking about. We are talking about people who are in the villages, and some of them have to cross river to go to school. There are people who have to share uniform with their siblings. These are the people we are talking about. We are talking about people who need it the most. Yes.
But let me come back to you. Talking about bridging the inequalities and all that, how do we identify? Is it easy for us to, you gave a very good scenario, other countries are doing that, like products that are consumed by women and children, there's a way that we can reduce taxes on it so that the product becomes very affordable to these people. In Ghana, do you see this feasible? Can we cultivate or implement similar models in Ghana?
Of course, it's possible in Ghana. I mean, identifying those who are poor comes with, as he said, identifying the income levels of those who are poor. And then through doing that, we'll be able to identify what those people purchase more, where their purchasing power lies. And then through that, we would reduce the taxes on the indirect.
But generally, how would you then assess the tax system in Ghana?
In what way?
Your assessment, is it favorable? Because we've had institutions kicking against our tax system. We've had, let's say, we've seen governments reducing taxes in some sectors, right, for businesses to have the enabling environments to thrive. But do you see our tax regime as something that is encouraging, something that is also promoting growth? Maybe you would want to start off.
Yeah. The research has shown that our tax system needs to be improved upon. Because, why do I say that? Because we collect most of our taxes from indirect taxes, which is about 55% of the taxes that we collect in the country.
Okay.
At the neglect of certain key areas,
Okay.
gray areas, areas that we can harness, like extractive sector, like you talk about the underground economies, the informal sector, multinationals who are exempted from taxes. The idea is that when you exempt taxes from the multinationals, you attract FDI, foreign direct investment. But the question is, are we attracting foreign direct investment? And even if we are attracting, which kind of foreign direct investment are we attracting to the country?
Okay.
Is it a greenfield investment or a brownfield investment? I explain. The greenfield investment is when the multinational company comes into your country and does everything from A to Z in your country. The research and development is done in your country. Everything, the production, the manufacturing, everything is done in your country. But here is the case, we have most of the countries of the foreign direct investors who will come and acquire existing companies and try to change the top management level, who are mostly manned by their own people. At the end of the day, you see that, the idea behind foreign direct investment is to raise more taxes and to increase employment level. But if the research and development is not done in your country, if the manufacturing is not done in your country, how much are you going to gain from that investment? So these are the areas we need to talk. So, we just need to revise our note when it comes to giving tax exemptions and holidays.
What then can we do to improve upon our tax system in the country, considering the fact that, well, sometimes we give a lot of preference to foreign investors who come into the country at the detriment of local investors? What can we do to improve upon our tax system?
So one way to improve on it is to increase direct taxes rather than indirect taxes.
Okay.
Because if we're talking about the poor being overexposed to these taxes, then we'd have to find other ways to increase our taxes, which is through direct taxes. A way we can do that is maybe less tax exemptions, shorter tax holidays for these corporations. So instead of giving them maybe 12 years tax holidays, we give them less, maybe 1 or 2 years to come set up. Some may argue that this gives them less incentive to actually want to come to our country, whereas other countries might be giving them longer tax holidays. But it's a way for us to increase our own tax revenue. Another way, which we found, was more at the district levels, so the MMDA levels, with property taxes.
Okay.
And by increasing property tax, or more like enforcing property taxes and collecting more at that level, it would enable districts to develop more, because they would be able to provide more in the health in the district, the health sector in their district, and also in the education sector in their district.
Talking about property tax, I'm wondering, in Ghana, is GRA really able to collect, or people voluntarily paying their property tax? And if they are they really paying what is expected of them?
Okay, property taxes collection doesn't fall under GRA. It's done at the district level by the MMDs, the district assemblies. They do collect the property taxes. But the question is, or the issue is, there are a lot of bottlenecks, a lot of challenges. Valuation issues come in, the issue of non-identification of owners, the issue of corruption, the collectors going out and undervaluing properties, so that at the end of the day they will go behind the door to collect something, the kickbacks. So the property tax is a very good tool that the district assemblies can use to develop education and health, like she said. But much needs to be done about it. We are not doing
But how do we enforce that? Because very often, just to clarify that, very often we've seen GRA, because they are more or less like the tax collectors. So everything would fall under their umbrella, even though there are sections who are mandated to do that. We've seen them indicating that, well, they have been able to exceed their revenue targets. They've had shortfalls in certain areas. But there are some sectors or some areas that we can generate enough revenue from. And one of them as the property tax, which we haven't really seen much coming out from it. And I don't know what the enforcement is like as it stands at the moment, whether people are even going there voluntarily to file their property tax and all that. And even the evaluation, what can we do to enforce or to encourage people to pay what is due based on their property?
Okay. First and foremost, the bylaws are there. If people don't pay, they must be forced to pay. We need to establish punitive actions against them. They have to. It is constitutionalized.
Okay.
You need to pay your taxes. So you have to. Another way by which we can maximize property taxes collection is to educate more. People do not even know the essence of collecting these property taxes. They are not seeing the developmental activities. They'll ask themselves, if they collect the taxes, what do they use the money for? So we need to educate the people. And information asymmetry is something that is a challenge to everything. If you want to succeed in everything, people not having the right information. We suggest that at the end of every year or quarterly, we can publish the amount of taxes we collected from property taxes. At the district level, bring the communities on board. These are the taxes we collected from property taxes. These are the activities, the projects we have done with the property taxes. So if we do inclusive governance like that, people will be motivated to pay the taxes. But if you don't do inclusive governance, and at the end of the year, people don't know how much you have earned and what you have used the money for. How can you encourage them or motivate them to pay the taxes?
But what could be impeding the collection of these property taxes at the assembly level?
So like he mentioned, lack of education. People don't know why they should pay the taxes. And then beyond that, in terms of the actual collectors going out there, we found through our research that in some districts, there were fraudulent practices where people were issuing fake receipts, for example, and actually collecting the property taxes. But instead of reporting it back, they would maybe pocket it, for example. So in that case, you would need enforcement both for individuals to pay and also to prevent the collectors from actually doing some of these horrible things, like pocketing money that's supposed to go to the government, which is really bad. So that's one way. And also with the database of properties, like he mentioned, with the new addressing system, to identify properties and also to make sure that all properties in the area are actually authorized to be there. Another issue that we found is that we had a lot of unauthorized buildings where there are buildings going up, but they're not issued permits to be up. In that case, the government or the district is not able to identify that, hey, this property is here and it's supposed to pay the taxes on the property.
Was your research able to come up with a number of unauthorized buildings?
Unfortunately, because of data problems, no. We didn't come up with the number.
Because that's also another serious issue. Yes. And I find that worrying where we put up structures. Sometimes we allow these institutions or these individuals to put up structures in places that are not authorized. And then when they are done, we come back to say that you need to pull down the structure. But sometimes even when you tell them you need to pull down the structure, it takes a number of years. The structure will still be there unless an unfortunate incident happens, and then we go like, this is even not an authorized structure that's supposed to be there. Why do we set as a country for some of these things to happen? what can we do to mitigate it? Because if at the end of the day we are losing revenue,
yes, we are.
because we are not being able to tax properties because they are not authorized, and therefore data availability to these institutions or agencies become difficult. What can we do about this particular situation?
So now the issue falls on the district assemblies. If the land evaluation section would do their work well, they will need to collaborate more with the chiefs in the country, making sure that every land that is given out, if a chief doles out a land to somebody, that chief needs to be gazetted. It is not anybody or any chief at all that gives a land. If the chief is not gazetted and gives a land to somebody, it is a land that is not registered. So, the person who takes that land, by all means, wouldn't have to follow the process of going to the land evaluation or the land commission to register the land.
Okay.
He will just start putting up the building on it. Yes. So, we need to have, like I said earlier on, everything that we do, we need to bring on board the opinion leaders.
Okay.
And have a word with them, speak to them. That, I mean, we are losing a lot out of taxes, property taxes. It is because of the fact that one of the reasons is we are not identifying some of the land, the buildings. You don't even know their owners. So how can you identify the person who owns that building to go and then collect the property taxes? So it starts from the chieftaincy level up to the land evaluation level. We need to correct all these loopholes from there so that we can be able to raise more taxes out of property taxes.
Let me come to you. You did research on health. What were some of your findings?
Okay, so some of our findings were to do one with access and affordability of healthcare.
Okay.
So with access, we found that only 41% were covered by the NHIS and the remainder were not. So they would have to pay a lot of out-of-pocket fees, which are the upfront costs that you pay when you go to the hospital. And this affects a lot of the poor, for example. And then we also found that the affordability was also a big issue. So we found that the out-of-pocket expenditure was about $29, which is roughly around 120 cedis for upfront costs in the year. So if you take that and take a poor person or a disadvantaged person's income, how much of that impacts what they get? And then in terms of infrastructure and resource allocation, we found that a lot of rural communities lack hospitals or some health facilities, whereas like in the more urban areas, you find that there are a lot more hospitals and a lot more access to these facilities. So that's some of the things that we found.
Did they complain about quality?
Yes, quality is also a very big deal. So if you look, for example, in the doctor to patient ratio.
Okay.
And as you know, the president addressed this last year, saying that overall in the country, it's one doctor to about 8,000 patients. And then you have to think that in the urban areas where there are a lot more hospitals, a lot of the doctors would be here. So imagine the doctor to patient ratio in the rural areas. And that affects quality a lot. So in terms of going to the hospital and finding a doctor that can actually help you, it's very problematic. So the country would need to address that.
But what's the way forward? You have been able to identify issues confronting them in regards to health in terms of inequalities. Were you able to provide practical solutions as to how best this can be kept?
Yes, of course. So in terms of training and deployment of healthcare personnel into the rural areas, so providing them with incentives to actually want to go to these rural areas. I mean, you would understand why someone would want to work in Accra versus going somewhere in the Upper East, or where maybe they feel like they wouldn't be able to get all the things that they can get in Accra. So by the government providing incentives there, so maybe building bungalows or giving them some sort of incentive to make me want to go and stay there. As compared
but
to
are these incentives personal incentives or incentives that some people are motivated when they have the logistics that they are supposed to work with, and sometimes in the past there has been issues where some of these practitioners claim that when you go to these facilities, even the logistics that they need to work with, they are not there. So are we talking about personal incentives, or we're talking about incentive with regards to the work that they do in terms of logistics, or probably we're talking about both?
So we're talking about a combination of both. So personal incentives to actually make you want to go there, and then you need an incentive to keep you there. So that would be with the resources, maybe medical supplies being sufficient there. Because if you're a doctor and you're working and you don't have syringes, for example, how would you be able to work? So the government ensuring that in these facilities they're well equipped to deal with the challenges they have in their areas.
I'm wondering the kind of incentives that would give to medical practitioners to move to areas like this, but their core duty is also to save lives. So if you're very passionate about what you do, I hope that if governments and also managers of the economy are listening and they provide them with all the logistics, all the incentives that they need, we should be able to bridge that. But in terms of education, what were some of your findings?
Okay. In terms of education, we found out that over the years, government allocation or expenditure has increased in education. Like in 2018, from 2017 to 2018, the expenditure allocation to education is 11%. But the issue is, or the question that needs to be answered is, what is the composition of the budget allocation? What goes into what? What goes into compensation? What goes into infrastructure? What goes into logistics? These are the key issues that were found. Because if you read the document, you'll find out that about 91.4% was allocated to compensation. That is salaries and wages. And in 2018, it now increased to 98.5%. So, expenditure or allocation has increased. But does it solve the issue of inequality? Because, fine, you can say that, okay, it has increased because there is a free SHS. But the question is, we need to talk about equity versus equality. Let's have the scenario here. You put two athletes on a track, on an oval track. One is in the middle, one is outside the track. You bear with me that the one inside the track, because it is an oval, will have an advantage over the one outside. But the concept of equality says that we should all start at the same level. So like the free SHS, let everybody go to school. But we can all go to school. Do we have the same facilities at Nandom as in Accra? No. Do we have the same infrastructure, the same training materials, the same teachers? Of course, the teachers may be the same because they are all trained teachers. But the thing is, there are even inequalities when it comes to teachers who are sent to the villages and those in the cities. So we need to solve the equity before we can even solve the equality. We need to give the impetus, something that will motivate that person. If a child goes to school for free and the child is hungry, can he compete with the other person in Accra who may have 3 square meals a day? No. So we need to solve the critical areas, providing infrastructure, giving more supervision, because you know that even when you come to the private schools in the cities, most of the teachers there are not trained teachers. They are, some of them are SSS leavers. But I know that at the end of the day, they churn out students who are performing even better than those in the public school. Why? It is because they have that kind of supervision. So we need to improve upon supervision at the district assembly level, at the rural areas.
Okay.
So the finding has shown that even though expenditure in the education sector has increased over the years, there's more room for improvement in terms of infrastructure.
Okay.
Yes.
But talking about the free SHS policy, per your findings, would you say that we are on track?
Like I've said already, the free SHS policy is good, but we need to do more. We have seen documentaries, some unconfirmed report, showing that students have gone to school and they are struggling with infrastructure. So the policy is good. I mean, if everybody gets the chance to go to school for free, it's good. There are some people who wouldn't be on the street if they had that opportunity. But the question is, or the issue is, we need to do more in terms of the infrastructure level and logistics. Okay. We need to improve that sector. Yes.
But you made mention of the fact that funds allocated to education keep going up. And do you see the free SHS policy as a sustainable one, considering the fact that even the initial stage when it was rolled out, we had issues with infrastructure, there were some infrastructural deficits and all that. What was your findings in line with that? Did you do any research, any findings as to the sustainability of some of the policy or existing policies with regards to education?
Yes, so if we talk about the sustainability, now we know that there are issues like we have already raised. But our research proposed that the government cannot put everything on its chest.
Okay.
So what are some of the other areas we can raise revenue to support the free SHS policy? And this is why one of the suggestions was has to do with the property taxes.
Okay.
That the MMDs, municipal, metropolitan, district assemblies, need to do more in terms of raising more revenue from the property taxes. Because, I mean, if you raise more revenue from the property taxes, you can provide accommodation for teachers who are posted to the rural areas. You can add more supervisors to the already existing supervisors. There are certain petty things that the government, that we do not have to fall on the district assembly common fund, like buying chalk, providing desks and what have you. So the district assemblies need to increase their pace in terms of raising more taxes to support it. Apart from that, if you look at the research, we say that tax exemption and deduction to multinational firms in Ghana amount to an average of 1.3 billion a year, representing two-thirds of education budget and 80% of the health budget. But these areas, if we are able to work on the tax exemptions, we can get that money or income to support the education in Ghana.
Did your research only focus on taxation, education, and health? Were there other sectors that you took into consideration in bridging the inequalities in the country?
So those were the main areas that we focused on and sort of interlinking them. So in providing solutions for health and then education, what can be done. So what are the practicalities? So we looked at taxes as a way, like if taxes are increased, it means that more can go into these sectors. So that's where we focused most on.
You have come up with a research, but then let's get to appreciate it, Brighter. Every research comes with its model, comes with its structure, but which regions, or what are some of the indicators you took into consideration before arriving at this research?
Okay, so a chunk of our research was based on data from 2015 to 2016 in terms of the taxes and the actual empirical analysis on tax exemptions and tax holidays. And outside of that, we also looked through and analyzed the budget statements from 2015 all the way up to the recent one, 2018. In terms of the districts and the areas that we looked through, it was mostly a nationwide study. So we identified a lot of the regions, especially the rural districts, that needed a lot more support in terms of health and education.
In terms of funding, how much did you spend on the research?
Okay, so when it comes to funding, this project was done in collaboration with Oxfam Ghana.
Okay.
So they provided the funding, and we are research partners. So we cannot, we cannot say the figure that we spent A or B on the project, because our funders provided everything for the research.
But let's also talk about, most often we see good research. We do have research materials in the country, but its implementation is a problem. I'm sure you had a target in mind that when you're done with this research, this is what you intend to do with it. Who were you targeting in mind to be able to share some of your findings with?
Okay, so for now, we are meeting with the Parliamentary Select Committee on Education, Health, Finance, and Local Government to meet with them and then discuss some of the findings that came out of the research. So last week, myself and my coordinator were at the Parliamentary Select Committee to ask for a date where we can meet them to introduce our findings to them.
Have you been able to get a confirmed date?
So far, in terms of health, they have given approval that yes, the meeting will come on, but they have not been able to give the specific date, and we are still calling on the others to make sure that we are able to meet with them, so that it won't end there. We want the research to find the findings to find itself in the budget, the 2019 or 18 budget, so that the issues will be addressed. And apart from that, we have written media articles, briefing papers on all the findings, so that it will go down to the grassroots level.
Okay, let me just pick your final comments. What would be your message to managers of the economy?
Okay, so now we have seen that inequality is on the increase in terms of education and health, because there are certain areas that do not have the requisite facilities.
Okay.
So we want the managers of the economy to be up and doing, to work more towards the Sustainable Development Goal 10, which is the reduction of inequalities, by putting more resources in the area of education at the rural areas, and that of health. We want them to focus on maternal health, neonatal health, and other salient areas in the health sector.
Hilary, what's your final comments?
As a government, as a country, we need to do better. We need to collect more taxes. We need to make sure that the poor are not overexposed to these changes in tax and fiscal policies. So we just need to make sure that we all do our part, from property taxes all the way up to paying direct taxes. Everyone should make sure that they play a role in the development of our country.
All right, so we'd like to say thank you. So let's all contribute towards the development of the Ghanaian economy. We'd like to say thank you to Hilary Shares, the Programs Associate at CAT Ghana, and also to Isaac, he's the Deputy Country Coordinator also with CAT Ghana. Thanks so much for sharing your findings with us. We hope that these findings will be taken into considerations, and then we'll see some improvement in the lives of the vulnerables in the society. So that's all we have for you by way of Business Day. My name is Winifred Ampiel. Do enjoy the rest of our programs. We'll come your way same time tomorrow.